What's up, everybody? It's Disthunder. Today we're going to take a look at the Mezco 112 Collective Classic Spider-Man and Green Goblin. I'm going to treat them like a two-pack, even though they are individual releases, because clearly they were intended to complement each other, and they do so very, very well. I am, however, going to dispense with my usual background information on these two characters because really there isn't a whole lot that I can cover that hasn't been covered already. And, well, hell, where Spider-Man's concerned, I probably already covered it in previous Spider-Man figures. One thing I can at least attempt to speak to is the style of these two figures. Spider-Man in particular, because the internet was a little cranky about him, you may recall. Now, I would say this figure is probably more inspired by Steve Ditko or, say, Gil Kane or maybe John Romita Sr. than really like a one-to-one direct translation. He's got the proportions of Ditko Spidey because he's obviously a little bit skinnier and he's a little shorter because in the 60s, even people have forgotten, Peter Parker was a teenager. But he doesn't quite have that rangy athletic build that I would associate with, say, a John Romita Sr. version. Now, for the Green Goblin, on the other hand, I mean, I'm serious. You could pick an artist from anywhere from about, I don't know, the 60s to the early 80s, when the house style of Marvel started to kind of wane after so many years. And this Goblin would represent him pretty easily. And that's why I think they work so much better together as a pair, because this pairing makes Green Goblin seem the threat that he should be. He's obviously older, he's bigger, he's meaner. It just works that much better. But thanks to Goblin's size, and of course we'll get into some comparisons later, that means if you didn't pick up this classic Spider-Man, but you still wanted to pair him with the Mezco original Spider-Man, which I am still a fan of to this day, I think that would still work as well. For articulation, you are basically looking at the same layout and design as the movie Spider-Man figures, although we now have this modified neck joint system, kind of like Superman's. Some of the joints are a little wobbly on those, but your mileage may vary. I know people were concerned about the durability of the suit when it bunches up, moving the shoulders and elbows, but I've been playing this figure now for 2 weeks, and I have seen no stresses or cracking in the fabric, so I think you're okay there. All that aside, the only thing I feel like he's missing is his torso joint is a little short. That could be due to the size of the joint itself. It just doesn't allow for a lot of forward motion. It does do a little bit better on the backward motion. But that and the lack of butterfly joints is my only real complaint, because otherwise, as far as range of the joints go, this Spider-Man does exceptionally well. As you can see, the double jointed knees are great. There is an excellent pivot on the ankle joints. And even the shoulders being single joints have a good range out for like a YT pose if you want to go push the suit that far. And here is that No Way Home suit, or is it No Way Home? You know what I meant. But as you can see, the bodies are very similar, if not the exact same. I think there are some, I want to say the torso may be slightly different. But of course, he shares absolutely nothing except for name with the original Mezco Spider-Man, who is considerably bigger, and now I think this works much better as a modern adult version of the character. Being like a Mark Bagley fan in the 90s, this one still kind of holds a soft spot for me. But there really is no reason not to have more than one version of this character, even if they appear to have the same costume. But as you can see here, proportion-wise, he has considerably shorter legs and a shorter torso than this first release Spider-Man. And actually, for what it's worth, I think the classic has better proportions as a result. I think he doesn't appear as gangly as, say, Miles fares a little bit better, but now by comparison, that first Spider-Man does appear kind of lanky. Here's a more straight head-on look at the two Spider-Men in comparison. I thought about grabbing out the symbiote costume and Spider-Man 2099, but obviously this is kind of an easy way to look at it. If it's smaller than this Spider-Man, he's going to be smaller than the rest. But that does make the way he pairs up with Goblin really perfect, in my opinion, especially for a Silver Age sort of vibe. I think this sells the intimidation that an adult Norman Osborn would have over a young Peter Parker perfectly. And although I don't have one anymore, his size actually makes me think, if you're not a big fan of that classic style Goblin mask and head, he may be a worthy candidate for a head swap, like with an older Legends figure, if you want something slightly more modern. Articulation is very similar here. There is a double jointed neck that's hidden beneath the collar of the suit. I had to pull it off to find out for sure. But no butterfly joints, standard shoulder, bicep cut, double jointed elbow, ball jointed wrist, ball jointed hips, double jointed knees, thigh swivels, etc., etc. But of note here is not only is the range good, the figure himself is kind of stiff. It's got some resistance to it, which actually makes it, I don't know, he feels a little bit more just kind of tough than Spider-Man does, which I don't know if that was on purpose or not. But the one function that does absolutely help with is getting him into that deep crunch to get on his Goblin glider. And at first look, you might think there's no way this guy's going to crumple up and fit on that glider. But the reality is the range of motion, and actually I think the stiffness of the joints helps there as well. He can get into that deep crunch pose, and he can hold it very well. The glider obviously was purpose-made, so that helps as well. But again, if I had a Toy Biz figure laying around, I'd be tempted to try an older glider to see if he could fit on it, because I think he probably could. It's also worth mentioning the quality of the suit feels very rigid. The way they did the scaling on the green parts feels better than older figures that I have where they're unfortunately starting to flake. And because I will forget to mention it later, the way to attach him to this glider is to use the foot pegs first, and then these little over the top of his foot clasps will just click on over the top. The pegs are doing the majority of the heavy work there, but that's how it works. To finish up with the scale comparisons here is the Ascending Knight head on the Golden Age Batman body, which is kind of a contemporary, I would say, to that Spider-Man, although by this point Batman would have a yellow oval. Still, I'm sticking with that. And here he is with the first Spider-Man figure from Mezco Toys, and as you can see, Goblin is still a little taller, and I mean, I would say at least as big, if not slightly bigger than Spider-Man, so I think he still comes across with those good villain proportions. And lastly, for consistency, here he is with Supreme Knight Batman, who he is still taller than. Obviously, Supreme Knight is a lot thicker, but for any villain character like Green Goblin, I like something that feels like he's, 6'2", 6'3", and maybe 200 pounds. Let's jump over to the many accessories between these two figures, and we'll start with something kind of simple, which is the Spider Sense effect that clips onto the posing stand. Then we have the Spider Parachute, which is hilarious and awesome. This thing actually has a lot of sculpt work that went into it, and is surprisingly fun to dick around with, especially in the front room. He has many web effects, but the funnest ones are going to be the shield and the backpack, and then he has several of these thwip effects, which we have seen on previous Spider-Man figures, but they still work great. And, the combination of these elements together, I mean, I guess I could have put him on here with the parachute and just kind of completed the set, but lastly, Peter has not forgotten his day job, and he does come with a camera and appropriate posing hands to hold and click said camera correctly. For heads, we do have a completely unmasked Peter Parker head and a Spider Sense effect Peter Parker head, which I honestly don't know that I'll get a whole lot of use out of. I mean, I get what it's going for, and it's definitely comic appropriate, just not something I'll use a lot. But the Peter Parker head does come with glasses as well to match that half head. And this is going to sound stupid, but I actually think I like the sculpt on the half head just a teeny bit better than the regular one, and I can't put my finger on what it is. Here is that unmasked head with his glasses on the figure, though, just because it seems kind of funny to show you all these heads without actually showing them on the figure. Switching back over to the masked heads again, he comes with this interesting light-up effect for his, it's basically the same style as the standard head, which gives this kind of soft, light glow. Again, probably kind of a Spider Sense effect is what they were going for. It's kind of cool. It wouldn't have been something that I would have thought to include or ask for, but in practice, it's kind of neat. As you can see, it is pretty similar to the default head, and that is actually my favorite of the three. However, there is a more classic Ditko-inspired one if that is your preference. And it's good looking. Then for the last of his accessories, we have his camera once again, and his spider tracer and a receiver to trace said spider tracers. A mask that can be held in his hand, or in Goblin's hand, I suppose, and a newspaper. It's a pretty impressive loadout. It's a lot of cool little stuff and some kind of wild big stuff. Now for Goblin's accessories, we have a couple different propulsion effects for his glider. This is the standard jet blast out the back, which makes the most sense for his level flight. Then he has these nice kind of hovering effects, which also double as kind of a stand for the glider and the figure if you don't want to put it on the flight stand. I don't mean to sell it short. Mezco always does an excellent job on these kind of effects. Then we get to the fun stuff, like his throwing effect with his frog bomb. There's just this feeling that a lot of thought went into this and a lot of effort, and it's pretty awesome. Of course, it would be silly not to include a flaming pumpkin bomb throwing effect, which he does here, and it is to great effect that that piece is included. And just because, why not, he has a ghost bomb effect as well that works in similar fashion. Only problem with these three effects is they are all intended for his left hand, which is the better grip hand for the glider. So he has to kind of freehand it if he's going to chuck stuff at Spider-Man. I don't know if I pointed out, but these are little thruster pieces that plug in if you're not using the hover effect parts. I don't know if I brought that up before. The glider's wings are hinged. They actually have little pistons on the underside to kind of support them. And overall, it's deceptively simple, but really nicely done. For some extra head options, here we have a laughing and a grin version of the Green Goblin mask. And I think the one with the smile that I had on in most of these pictures is my favorite of the three, but these are still excellent. A lot of paint detail and a lot of work went into those. Same can be said for the Norman Osborn heads, which both look pissed off, but there's a serious and then there's a going a little crazy version, which is, again, more than I would have expected they would include. And with that on the figure, with the mask in hand, that is a pretty damn cool look. So I'm definitely grateful for the option and kind of thinking maybe I need a suited body for the other Norman head to put on there one of these days. His shoulder bag can hold his extra pumpkin grenades or the his little not batarang throwing bats can fit in there as well. It has a nice little magnetic clasp on it to close it up, so it's pretty secure. And then here's just a little detail shot of the Goblin mask, a couple of the pumpkin bombs, and those bat throwing stars. He also has an effect for the throwing stars and for like a sparkle blast, and I didn't show those because I ran out of time, but they're also included, so you'll find those in there and they'll be a surprise, right? So it'd be fair to ask, as we do my usual recommendation, should you buy kind of segment, whether you should purchase these just as the set or if they're worthwhile individually. And honestly, they are worthwhile to have individually as figures in their own rights. And that's because there is a large quantity of accessories and thought and just value where these are concerned. So if you're not a massive Green Goblin fan or vice versa, or say you have the original Spider-Man, you don't need a classic Spider-Man for whatever reason, you could justify purchasing either one. But getting them in a pair means that they kind of complement each other's shortcomings. If you perceive things like Spider-Man's height as a shortcoming, Goblin kind of makes up for that in spades. So I think, especially as a pair, Mezco did an excellent job here, and I think they work great as Silver Age representations of classic Marvel characters. So I would like to thank Mezco for helping me get the pair to review for you today. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to my friend Lord Adjust on Instagram, who took some amazing pictures of the two of them that I couldn't even come close to replicating. So I just borrowed them from him. So thank you for letting me share those with you guys. And thank you for watching. We will talk again soon.